I believe we should get started. Welcome, everyone. A reminder that Chris Harrington is serving as our meeting host, so if you have a connection problem or issues with technology, please contact him either through chat or his phone number was included in the agenda package that Michelle emailed out last week. I want to remind everyone, mute your microphone if you're not speaking. Have your participant and chat windows open if possible. Use the raise hand feature if you'd like to contribute to the discussion, and that all votes will be via roll call. Further reminder, all the motions include predetermined movers and seconders to assist with the logistics of this virtual meeting, and I'll ask you to confirm those intentions as we deal with each agenda item. And you'll note today's meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the Upper Thames YouTube channel as part of our requirement to allow public viewing of proceedings. The traditional territorial greeting will begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Adawaniran, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Lopane peoples who have long-standing relationships to the land, water, and region of southwestern Ontario. The local First Nation communities of this area include Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, Munsee Delaware Nation, and Delaware Nation at Moravian Town. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing Indigenous urban population. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island. I know we have regrets from Alex. He had a loss in the family. Michelle, did we have any other regrets?
No, I haven't received any other regrets.
Okay, I'll ask you now to call the roll so we can post attendance for the public record.
Marie Blosh.
I am here.
Alan Dale.
Present.
Don Edmonston. Anna Hopkins.
Here.
Tony Jackson.
Here.
Sandy Levin.
Here.
Nancy Manning.
Present.
Hugh McDermott.
Here.
Paul Mitchell.
Present.
Anna Marie Murray.
Present.
Brian Petrie.
Present.
Jim Reffel.
Here.
Joe Salter.
Here.
Mark Schadenberg.
Here.
And we received regrets from Alex Westman.
Okay, approval of the agenda. Brian, would you like to move it and Jim second it?
I would like to move it, please.
I second that.
Are there any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none. Michelle, please call the roll.
Marie Blosh.
Yes.
Alan Dale.
Yes.
Don Edmonston. Anna Hopkins.
Yes.
Tony Jackson.
Yes.
Nancy Manning.
Yes.
Paul Mitchell.
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray.
Yes.
Brian Petrie.
Yes.
Jim Reffel.
Yes.
Joe Salter.
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg.
Yes.
And Sandy Levin.
Yes. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest? Seeing none. Minutes of the previous meeting, Tuesday, August 25th, 2020. I'll ask you to move it and Mark to second.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Are there any errors in the minutes? Seeing none. Michelle, please call the roll that we approve the director's minutes dated August 25th, 2020, including any closed session minutes as posted on the members' website.
Marie Blosh.
Yes.
Alan Dale,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Sandy Levin.
Yes. There is no business arising from the minutes. There are no delegations. We have business for approval. The 2021 draft budget concepts menu. Can I ask that Jim, could you move it and Marie second it?
I so move.
And I'll second it.
Okay, we have the report on the table. Are there any questions for staff? Christine, would you like to give us some background on the recommendations?
Well, Ian prepared the report as a way to gather guidance. We are deliberating over what kind of increase to put in our costs based on feedback that he's received already from the municipalities. It appears that we're not going to be able to expand our activities to incorporate the last bit of the targets. And inflation has been quite a topic. So the idea is that 0.6 is going to be used on the salary grid, but other costs that we forecast in the budget will vary based on the programs and what the program needs and how we experience cost changes. So the example in the report about the benefits going up 10%, that may or may not hold true for next year, but it's certainly going to be higher than inflation that it rises. Our insurance is probably 12 to 15% higher for next year again. We've had advance notice of that. So the 0.6% inflationary increase is not an across the board kind of increase. It's directed to the wage grid, but other costs and obviously revenues are going to have to be estimated as well. So I think the idea behind Ian's report, and he should probably speak to it, is municipalities are not anticipating large increases, so we're going to do our best not to do that. Those are my key comments.
Ian, do you have anything to add before I turn it over to the board for questions?
Yes, I will just say at a high level, again, we're looking for your guidance, but probably the struggle or the challenge I feel the Conservation Authority is in this year is this dilemma between supporting our environmental targets and funding it appropriately as we've planned for the past 5 years now, versus not so much the pandemic's impact, but Bill 108, and knowing that in the future, we are going to have to negotiate multi-year agreements with municipalities to continue some of our services. We don't know what those are yet. So in a sense, the staff recommend before trying to, I'll be blunt, to play nice with municipalities, to strategically, I see I have an unstable connection
Yes,
here.
you do.
So if I'm, strategically, we're trying to play nice, to be blunt, with the municipalities, knowing that in 2021, we'll be negotiating multi-year agreements. So I think that's the high level dilemma. And I'm very conscious of the board's position in developing the 2020 budget and support for targets, which was appreciated. At this point, the staff recommendation is no growth, which means no support for targets, but certainly that's, we're seeking direction from the board. So that's my comments, Sandy.
Thank you, Ian. I've got a speakers list, Paul, Anna, and then Ellen.
Yes, through you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to point number 12 of the report regarding the impacts current value assessment and the impact that's going to have on the various municipalities, rural versus urban. And I went on the impact website, and it said under 2020 assessment update, the Ontario government has announced that the 2020 assessment update has been postponed. The province has indicated that property assessments for the 2021 taxation year will continue to be based on the fully phased in January 1st, 2016 current values. So I'm not sure, hopefully staff can explain this to me. Does that mean if for example, residential went up 1%, farmland went up 10% in 2020, that it will go up 1% and 10% in 2021? Or does that mean that the assessments won't be changing in 2021? Because that's going to have an impact on any increase to our budget as far as impact to the various municipalities.
Through the chair, I'll start answering, and I'll look to Christine as well. So how we allocate our levy each year is based on, as Paul was describing, the relative change in the assessed value of land in a municipality. And that changes each year. So I confess, Paul, the notion that the assessment levels are frozen would have led me to believe that we should not have seen a change year to year. And that we wouldn't be changing our levy apportionment for 2021. However, we get that information from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and they get the impact data, they do an adjustment based on watershed area, and then they forward that information to us. So we received that about 3 weeks ago, Christine, or so.
Yes.
And we're seeing a change again. So, you know, I don't have an answer about MPAC freezing the assessment data. I get that they're not doing it in 2020 for the future, but frankly, the data we use is always a year behind. So I'm pretty sure it's 2019 data that would inform our 2021 budget. But you're right, if farmland value increased 10% versus residential at 1%, that means total assessment in the municipality, if it's rural, goes up faster than a more urban municipality. And then that becomes a percentage for our watershed, and those rural municipalities get hit harder. And we have seen that trend over the last 5 or 6 years, where every year the rural municipalities seem to be bearing more of the burden of our levy as it shifts. So Christine, I don't know if you have any more insight.
The only thing that I can think of that impact is talking about is the individual property value assessment. So it's built on a 4-year phased approach. So if your property was reassessed 3 years ago, you would normally expect an increase to your own property value, which would dictate how your municipality charges you your property taxes. It's my impression that that is the item that they're going to freeze, so that in the following year, in the 4th year, say, you might be experiencing all of a property value assessment, and therefore your taxes will be reflected accordingly. That's how I understand those comments.
And if I can add one more piece of context, and then I'm using Christine's words, if you're looking for the scale of change, I'll say West Perth and Perth South are 2 municipalities who have large farmland components to their municipality. So for our levy, they would get hit a bit harder. And I think Christine did the math that even if we set a 0% levy increase for the upcoming year, those municipalities might actually see a 2.5% increase. because of the shift in assessment data, which means that somewhere like London, more urban Stratford, would probably see a reduction in levy so that it averages out to 0%. But that's the scale of shift, and frankly that's a bit less than we've seen in the past years, where I think some of that shift was closer to 5 or 6%. So Christine's math was around 2.5% would be the shift for rural municipalities.
Paul?
Yes, thanks for those answers. That clarifies it for me. So we're working under the assumption that any increase in the budget will not be distributed equally, and that's something we have to take into consideration. To Ian's earlier point, that in the next year we'll be negotiating with the municipalities, and some of our rural municipalities have been the ones that have been most vocal about levy increases. So thanks for clarifying that for me.
Okay, Anna?
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, thank you, Ian, for the report. I really do appreciate having this conversation before we go through the draft process. And given the challenges that we have to deal with, I appreciate having this conversation. Do have two questions. The first one is on the inflation increase of 0.6. I understand it's just based on the salary grid. Do we normally apply inflation just on salaries, or how have we done that in the past? And the second question I have is regarding our environmental targets versus Bill 108. And I know, as a councillor for the City of London, we're going to be reviewing our four-year budget in the fall. And knowing that Bill 108 we're going to start getting into agreements in 2021 for mandatory and non-mandatory, and not really understanding how that's going to look like. I'm just trying to understand how we project in our budget those increases, not knowing where things are going to go. And do you have a better understanding where we are going to be with these agreements under Bill 108 in 2021? So in other words, is it business as usual, that things just keep on rolling out and will happen? Or is there just want to have a little bit more background. Thank you.
Ian?
As to your first question, Anna, about is inflation applied to salaries only? Inflation is applied to salaries for sure, and that is a very large component of our budget. But as Christine mentioned, and she can probably elaborate, it may or may not be applied to other expenses as well. I mean, some things we're forced to pay more. We don't necessarily budget for it, like insurance. In some cases, we will apply it more broadly. It may get applied to the levy as a whole, for example. So whatever levy supports, it is applied, or there's that benefit there. When it comes to our user fees, we take that into account, but sometimes that gets modified by what the market will bear, for example. So it's a hit and miss, but definitely it's applied to wages. As far as your question about Bill 108, if you recall, the big question was this division of our programs and services between mandatory and non-mandatory. And there is no understanding where that line is. We have our ideas of where it should be, and Conservation Ontario is doing some great work to push the province in a certain direction. They have ideas as well, which are consistent with ours. But we don't have any more insight now than we had in the winter. Now, Alan Dale, the vice chair, and I were on a Zoom Conservation Ontario meeting yesterday where Minister UTRCA spoke at the beginning of the meeting, and there was that question to him. when will we have some clarity from the province? And his response was there will be legislative and regulatory amendments, hopefully during this session, so this fall. So we are expecting some news by December 10th when the House rises. But again, we have no insight. So Anna, the budget that's in front of you, or the budget we're preparing to develop, we assume it's a business as usual budget using our old levying powers. And we're making the assumption that 2022, that budget will have to adhere to whatever new rules the province is applying. You know, frankly, the longer we stall, the better from my point of view. It allows more consultation, it allows more time to work with the province around workable solutions. But frankly, I don't think we know anything more. And maybe Alan, if you want to add anything from yesterday.
Ellen?
Thank you, Ian. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the minister really didn't have anything new to add. He highlighted all about the consultation process, but yes, in the end, he did indicate that he'd hoped to introduce something sooner as opposed to later. So we'll see what he ends up unveiling for us in the near future.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. You still have the floor.
Yeah, I appreciate this update. You know, I think it's important that we all sort of try to understand what's ahead of us. Do you, through you, Mr. Chair, I guess back to Ian, maybe, do you see Bill 108 sort of helping us, not helping us, but I don't know how to put this, but the non-mandatory agreements that will be had with the municipalities sort of helping us with this budget, if that makes any sense, sort of less flow.
It won't affect this budget, Anna.
No, I know, but it won't affect 2021?
Correct.
Okay, so at all?
Ian, that's my understanding from, I mean, the legislation, if it comes in by the end of this year, we do or we don't know yet impact on 2021.
Yeah, through the chair, my assumption is Bill 108 will not directly affect the 2021 budget. However, if Bill 108 was not pending, I suspect I would not have put a staff recommendation in front of you to defer targets funding, for example. So in a sense, I do think Bill 108 is affecting my recommendation to you about how we proceed with 2021, because I'm trying to make sure we're positioned positively to implement Bill 108, that we have some good relations with the municipalities. So so Bill 108, the rules won't affect 2021, but the fact we're anticipating it does.
Thank you.
Anna?
No, I needed to hear that. Thank you.
Okay. Alan, then Joe and Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got two items. The first one is number 2, inflation. And a few people have touched on this. I've always questioned using consumer price index because a municipality or a public entity is not a regular consumer. And we purchase things like insurance and utilities, which traditionally tend to be a lot more of an increase. So I have a question then to Ian or Christine. I guess this generally works for the Conservation Authority to use this consumer price index, and I guess we're confident at this point that 0.6% is enough.
Ian or Christine?
Yeah, I'll start the answer. To your question, Alan, I agree completely. The consumer price index is not reflective of the cost of a business or certainly a not-for-profit. However, you know, I think this policy was maybe 10 years ago. We have a policy to use the consumer price index as a guide. It's supposed to be a guide for you in determining what an inflationary increase should be. Even though CPI isn't really reflective, it's the best number or the best tool we seem to have, other than just picking a number out of the air. So the 0.6 is, you know, it's consistent, as the report says, with the types of inflationary or the consumer price index calculations we've seen in Ontario and Canada. And yet I'm hearing other conservation authorities are just using numbers of 1.5 and maybe 2% in their early draft budgets, just because that's kind of the ballpark that inflation usually is in. So honestly, because we have this policy that says CPI, this board will consider CPI, that's why this recommendation's here. But you have all the latitude to use whatever value you feel is appropriate.
Alan?
Okay, thanks. That leads me into my second point, which was also mentioned a minute ago. That's number 11, the cost of living increase. And yes, yesterday at Conservation Ontario, we had a big discussion on this because for their 2021 budget, they had a 0% increase for cost of living for CO staff. And in the end, they felt that they should include something. And there were boards that were indicating that they were using 1.5. So that sort of seems to be where people are thinking when it comes to inflation in terms of cost of living increase, is something like a 1.5%. We proposed 1.9, but that's because we didn't do anything for 2020. Our staff got 0. I mean, we had passed it as a board, but our staff voluntarily eliminated that and took nothing for this year. And so we're giving them 1.9 really over 2 years. So, I mean, that's pretty bare bones. I don't know if Ian or Christine want to add anything to that.
Sure, through the chair. So to be clear, what number 11 in the report is trying to say is that yes, at the annual meeting this year in 2020, the board approved 1.9%, and that was applied to wages until I think June, Christine, or May or June, when we voluntarily rolled that back. So it's been 0% increase for the remainder of this year. All I am trying to say with this number 11 is come January 1st, we intend to restore that 1.9%, which was already approved by you. But as far as the 2021 budget, we're proposing an additional 0.6% on top of that. So I don't know what the math would be, because you're combining over 2 years, 1.9% for 6 months, 0% for 6 months, and then restoring the 1.9 and adding 0.6. So it gets a bit convoluted. But yes, it's I think the numbers are conservative and on the low end of what I'm hearing from other conservation authorities. And yet these numbers are all derived because we have this policy to use consumer price index.
Okay, thanks. And just so I'm clear on that, then the bullet number 2, the 0.6, it does apply also to wages. Like it's, as you mentioned, it will be an addition on wages too. Okay. I wasn't sure if it was going to include a cost like inflationary increase for everything, including wages or not. So I'm glad to see that it will. Thanks.
Okay, Joe, then Brian, Tony, and Mark. Joe, are you muted?
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, as we've been discussing, 0.6 is for inflation, and that's going to be across the board. We've
Yeah.
discussed a number of items that are looking at larger increases. Do we have any indication of what a overall budget maximum percentage increase should be? 1%?
Ian, do you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, through the chair. I mean, you're right, Joe. But it has never been our practice to change inflationary increase. So in this report, 0.6%. That is intended to cover wage increases, insurance increases, materials increases, the whole gamut is applied. Actual increases maybe more than that, and then it's up to us to, as managers, to either absorb or shift around for those to make sure we can pay those bills. We have not, I'll look to Christine too, but we have not gone through an exercise of partitioning out our expected expenses by percentage, you know, wages versus insurance versus benefits versus materials, all those things, to come up with a different calculation for inflation. Again, our policy says inflationary increases will be guided by the Consumer Price Index for Ontario. So that's where the number comes from. And, you know, many years it's probably on the low side of what our real cost increases are. I accept that.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian, then Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I don't envy staff in this position whatsoever, because this is probably the hardest budget year you're probably going to have. With all the unknowns out there, the province hasn't provided very good guidance on what they plan to do and how that's going to look. And I understand the balance to try to lower the increase. My concern is that we're going to get into infrastructure debt by not carrying enough funding through. I don't want to get in a situation like London did with 0% increases year over year over year. And then we get a big deficit where we have to make that up later and the levy just goes through the roof. I'd rather, you know, and even keel on that. It hurts a little bit every year, but it's not as big as the big hit at the end. I'm worried a little bit about the inflationary cost, especially when it comes to capital. The price of materials and goods, like construction, it has gone through the roof. You know, we're not talking 1 or 2%. We're talking 50%, 60%. That's concerning if we have big infrastructure projects, which we usually do going forward. I understand we use the CPI as a tool. It's our policy. I personally think it's a poor tool because it's, especially when it's Ontario wide, you know, look at the housing prices in our area alone. Those housing prices are not part of the CPI. So using that as a guide of what to use and how that affects us locally, like you say, it's usually on the low side, I'd imagine. I just want to make sure that the budget is taking in, for the most accurate part that staff can, the true inflationary costs of the products that we're using, mostly. And that I want to ensure that we have qualified staff that can ensure they can still live in the city that they live in, and that we can budget correctly for the projects that are going forward in the next coming year. I'm not too worried with when the province makes up its mind, that'll sort itself out eventually. But as far as budget for next year, that's my main concern, is the inflationary costs, and not putting ourselves in a hole that has to be made up in later years.
You looking for a response, Brian, or is that just comment? You're still muted. Sorry.
I apologize. If someone wants to give a response, they can. It was more of just my comment on the matter for putting it out there.
If I can, Sandy.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, just to Brian's one point about an infrastructure debt, if you look at my staff report and point number 9 says Mission Center investment, and I'm just disclosing to the board that additional funding is required to support, and I talk about hazard management, flood forecasting and warning. I talk about education and monitoring. I have a number in there of $200,000 for flood forecasting and warning. There is no doubt that overall our programs are underfunded, and I would call core, and that's why our reliance is so much on contracts, and we've had to rely on reserves to get through. Some of this funding need is because of infrastructure. We have to pay depreciation on past construction projects, and that's an ongoing expense for years. So there is no doubt that I would say we are underfunded from levy and certainly from the province, and that money is needed just to maintain our existing programs. But again, the recommendation that's in front of you is trying to balance this underfunding plus the fact that ideally we would be investing in growth through the environmental targets so that we can actually make a difference on the ground. But it's balancing those needs with what we've seen over the past few years and the frustration from some of our municipalities, and taking a longer view. If we're negotiating multi-year agreements, how do we want to position ourselves leading into those negotiations? So to Brian's point, I don't recall a year with so much uncertainty and trying to predict which way to go. Frankly, there is an opinion that says if this is the last year that we can levy municipalities normally, then we should go for it. I mean, we as staff talk about that. And yet that might be a short-term gain for much longer term pain. So again, your points, Brian, are well taken. Infrastructure is a challenge. Underfunding is a challenge. But again, looking at the long game, staff are coming up. The recommendation in front of you is still for a maintenance budget. When it comes to inflation, I mean, we'll take your guidance. If 0.6 seems low, which it is, we're open to other numbers. We'll work with it.
Thank you. Tony?
Yeah, if you can hear me, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Real, I guess the positive side is the cost to borrow money has never been cheaper, but that's really not what my point or question is about. So I understand that insurance is a concern going forward, cost increase. So what are the drivers driving the cost of insurance, and what are our options there?
Ian?
Yeah, I'll look to Christine as well. I mean, it's our benefits plan, which is a form of insurance, includes forms of insurance. So yeah, there's all kinds of drivers. We, our insurance plans, property liability insurance is through a Conservation Ontario kind of group program. So I believe we minimized our insurance costs through group buying. Our benefits program is not through Conservation Ontario. We do that on our own. And you recall, I think at our last meeting, we're going out to market again this year, which should reduce our costs for 2021 going forward. So I feel like we're managing the purchase of these insurance products as best we can. The drivers for those products, though, are all beyond our means, other than, benefits. Some of it's determined by our own use and how old staff are getting. And that's a bit beyond our control. So I don't know if that answers your question, Tony.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, the way I kind of look at it is that benefits are also part of my wage and benefit. So I know we're talking about 0.6 as an increase, but I do appreciate my benefits being carried forward in my own personal life, and I think the employees probably recognize that as a benefit. I know some companies that are struggling are eliminating benefits and cutting back on benefits and so on and so forth. So I don't think we should disregard the benefit of that when we recognize that it is an increase to our overall budget. There's value to the people too, and I think they recognize that. Not saying we should cut benefits or anything of the like, but I do consider it still a benefit and should be considered as, you know, a compliment to the employees and a benefit to their future and family's future. And it's not like it's just a 0.06 to be able to maintain and sustain benefits that are half decent today is a struggle in any organization. Thanks.
Okay. Mark, you had a hand up earlier. Are you satisfied with what you've heard so far?
Yeah, very much so. My question was kind of a broad question anyway, maybe outside of the budget for 2011. So maybe I'll ask Ian about it separately or somebody else that's involved in some projects that take place. So yeah, I'm fine with the question as pertains to this particular subject, yes.
Okay. Brian, you had a hand again, and then Marie.
Sorry, I forgot to ask this. My question is, we went through a strategic planning process and it came out with the environmental targets. We're deviating from that again this year. My question to staff is, do you feel this is still a deviation that we can return from, or with all the given changes from the province and the other pressures that we're facing, are we charting out on a new path that needs strategic thought again from a planning perspective?
Ian?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say my answer will be, from my point of view, as managers, we haven't got to the point of talking about this. I'd say the environmental targets, strategic plan, we are still believe in and are committed to, where the targets are to be achieved by 2037. There was a 4-year funding phase-in required up front to build the capacity, not just internally, but in the community, to do the volume of work that has to be done so we would achieve those targets by 2037. We were on track until this year, as you know, and if you recall at the annual meeting, we the increase that we were asking for through levy this year, we backed it off to a quarter of what the planned increase was going to be. So that obviously would affect how quickly things work. To Brian's point, I did view that as I'll call it a hiccup, and I think we could recover from that. What's being proposed going forward, though, deferring for another year and then having Bill 108 probably affect parts of our strategic plan funding. I don't know which parts. I would say we will have to revise what's achievable with that strategic plan, either push the timelines out further or adjust the targets accordingly with this change. So there's no doubt the budgets are affecting our ability to achieve that strategic plan. I don't think it's a hiccup anymore.
Right?
I'm good.
Brian, I think there you
Oh, here I am. Yeah, I couldn't unmute myself. It wasn't working. Yeah, actually, Brian asked the exact question that I had in terms of whether we were abandoning the targets. I am a little concerned about this budget being a little overbroad on the self-inflicted cuts. It seems like there's nowhere else to go. But the other question that I had to do with kind of looking forward to having these negotiations with municipalities. Has there been any discussion with the Minister or Conservation Ontario? Is that going to be limited, or is there going to be in any way, is there going to be guidance in what to do, or is that going to be pretty much just left up to the conservation authorities to negotiate any which way they want with the municipalities? Is there any ideas on that yet? I'm just kind of looking forward and thinking, you know, all those things could be quite different, or they could be to accommodate different municipalities' concerns, or they could all be the same across the board? I'm just kind of wondering if there's any thought on that yet.
Ian?
No guidance yet, Marie, but those concerns were certainly expressed when we met with the minister as part of the consultation last December, or I believe it was. So the minister met with every conservation authority, with Conservation Ontario. We delivered those concerns about how these negotiations would proceed. Is it, you know, a collective that all 17 municipalities would negotiate a consistent service level to all 17, or is it one by one, which I think is what the province wants, is the one by one. And we expressed the impact that'll have on programs and services. I'll be blunt, I don't think it's workable. When your job's watershed management, the environment doesn't stop at municipal boundaries. So we have conveyed those messages. But as far as any feedback or any suggestion what direction the negotiations will go or how this will proceed, there's been nothing except, as Alan and I said, the province will be introducing legislative and regulatory changes this session. So I believe very much it'll be prescribed. We'll just be told, this is how you're going to do it. You know, there might be some templates about agreements, but I have no sense beyond that. So it's all part of this uncertainty.
Marie, does that satisfy?
I had a lot of troubles with my mute button. Well, it's not really, but it sounds like it's the best answer we can get. I guess the only other concern again is this budget is the inflation is too low. I mean, I guess it's some of the same concerns that have already been expressed in terms of, are we setting ourselves up for a bigger problem later? But so the conversation's been interesting. Thank you.
Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo Ian's comments there in response to Marie. Conservation Ontario staff have been sort of bending over backwards to talk to the minister or the staff at any occasion. They've also gone after the staff for Minister Jakubowski with natural resources. They're anything they can do to sort of get some information and some intelligence as to where this is going. They're trying to figure out and read the tea leaves. Is it going to come in the form of legislation? Is it going to come in as far as regulation? And they're not getting anything. And, it is frustrating because I think they really like to know sort of where the punch is going to come from and how hard it's going to hit. But we're no further ahead right now. We really don't know what's going to come, unfortunately.
Thank you, Alan. I see no other hands, but I'm going to ask a quick question going back to number 9, Ian. In that hazard management efforts and flood forecasting and warning are core. What is that impact of not funding $200,000 on that going to be to our delivery of a core service?
Yeah, through the chair, this isn't new. This underfunding has been there for several years, and I would say the authority has managed to continue to deliver the service very effectively because we've been aggressive in pursuing other sources of revenue. And, federal and provincial money has been a savior. The NDMP program, the DMAF program, which we told you about, has brought in lots of infrastructure money, which helps pay staff wages too in managing these projects. So we've always gotten by, but it is a frustrating and inefficient way to do business. And as a core program, we do feel stable funding, whether it's provincial transfer payment or if that's being downloaded to municipalities, that is ultimately required. So I would hope through your question, Sandy, I don't believe our recommendation to, as Marie said, kind of self-inflict a low increase on ourselves, I don't think it jeopardizes the program for a year, sustainable over 3 to 5 years. So, you know, the board needs to be aware that, you know, looking to the long game, if this is an effort to play nice in 2021, we can't be nice every year or we're not going to be able to deliver the service. And these are, you know, in the case of flood forecasting and warning and hazard management, this is public safety core program. It may result in, it looks like it'll be levy increases because the province is pushing all that funding to municipalities. So if that answers your question, Sandy.
Yes, thank you. So seeing no other hands, we have 3 recommendations on the floor that we approve the following as guidance for staff in the development of the 2021 budget. That the 2021 budget reflects a status quo budget in terms of service delivery, that an inflationary increase of 0.6% be included, that the final $230,000 municipal levy request in support of the environmental target strategic plan be deferred until 2022. Michelle, please call the roll on this.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Alan Dale, Alan,
Oh, sorry, yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson, Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Paul
Yes.
Mitchell, Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim
Yes.
Raffle, Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Sandy
Yes.
Levin.
We have report 6.2, Fanchon Pidak Dam Safety Reviews.
Chair,
Michelle?
sorry to interrupt. I did see a hand wave from Hugh.
Okay, Hugh? What have I missed?
Yeah,
Thank you.
on the last 3 roll calls, I've been missed.
I'm sorry. I just realized that I had missed your name on my
Oh,
written
no, that's
list.
okay.
I apologize.
Okay, no problem.
Hugh, would you like to be on record for those votes?
Yeah, I voted yes for all 3.
Thank you. All right, item 6.2, the Fanchon Dam Safety Review. I am Alan.
We're losing you, Sandy. I'm not sure if you're hearing us. I'm not even seeing you on screen, so maybe we lost you. Oh, no, you're there.
Alan, would you like to move this?
Oh, sorry, yes. Sorry, yeah, you weren't coming through. Yes, I will move the report.
Thank you. And Hugh, would you second it?
Yes, I seconded.
Thank you. Are there any questions to Chris or Fraser regarding the report? Which we have a recommendation regarding both Fanchon and Pidak. I see no hands. So the recommendation is that the budget for the Fanshawe dam safety review be increased to $128,400 from $100,000. The budget for the Pittock Dam safety review to be increased to $123,400 from $100,000. The budget increases include the identified provisional items to be undertaken and 2 vibrating wire piezometers to be installed at each of the 2 dams as outlined in the subsequent sections of the report. Michelle, could you call the roll, please?
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Alan Dale,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Sandy Levin.
Yes. Item 6.3, an update to hearing guidelines for conducting hearings. Anna move and Tony to second.
I so move.
I second.
Thank you. Tracy, would you like to give some background to this report? Because it's come up a couple of times at previous meetings about hearings and not being able to hold them during the last 6 months.
Yes, if I may, through the chair. Certainly, this was something that Conservation Ontario was working closely with some counterparts at the Ministry of Natural Resources and also the Mining and Lands Tribunal to gain feedback. I believe in the past, Grant Inglis has also reported that, yeah, during this time, the courts have needed to adapt and building on that experience of how other proceedings are being held and ensuring that we are consistent with the Statutory Powers and Procedures Act, some amendments are required to be able to conduct hearings electronically. Conservation Ontario provided this guidance document and it was approved at their council meeting yesterday. From what I've heard from Ian, that there was no amendments proposed to the guidance document, so none are needed to ours to reflect those changes. Again, the next step in the process will be for us to have some staff training, Conservation Ontario, in order to conduct virtual hearings, a little bit different than a board hearing, and the requirements for being able to also ensure that the public can attend. So a few other outstanding items before we're up and running with being able to conduct the hearings in an efficient manner, but this is the first step in that process. Not sure if Grant also wanted to add his thoughts, given his experiences as well with other hearings and deliberations during this time. Certainly a unique time.
Grant?
Hi. I think they're very well done. The only question I had, Trace, was it provides that at the ending of 3.4, that it says, for electronic meetings, the board is not considered adjourned unless any member departs due to technical issues for more than 15 minutes. And as the subject of a lot of those technical difficulties personally, I found that a little unusual because some of our members, our hearing members, will be not located, near strong cells, etc. So they could, in theory, be knocked down for 15 minutes. And that would mean under these guidelines that the hearing is then adjourned. And I can see applicants having a little bit of difficulty with that because it's not related to the subject, it's related to the technology. But other than that, I think they're well done. I think it's, we'll find out.
Yes, if I could respond to that. That's the challenging part about electronic hearings, because normally during a hearing, if someone leaves the room, the meeting is adjourned. But in this case, the being lost connection is kind of the equivalent of leaving the room. So yes, it'll be very important for any hearing members to be located in areas where they do have a strong cell service. So it might not be in their homes, and they might have to find alternative arrangements for those hearings, again, to ensure as best as we can connections that are stable.
Are there any questions from the board on the report and the recommendation in front of us? Seeing none, recommendation is that we approve the recommended changes to the hearing guidelines for conducting hearings pursuant to Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act for this conservation authority.
Actually,
Michelle,
Sandy, I have my hand up.
Sorry, I didn't.
Marie.
Yeah, go ahead, Marie. Yep.
Yeah, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
I just had a quick question in terms of the, if there's been any thought given to how site visits, which are often very important, would be dealt with. I mean, would it just be individually going, or has that been thought about at all?
Tracy or Ian?
I can start. Again, we do have for staff standard operating procedures for conducting site visits that ensures that people drive separately, people are able to maintain physical distances, and have those protocols in place. I imagine we would treat site visits the same for a hearings request. However, that's one of the things that I expect some of the training that Conservation Ontario is going to be providing will cover to ensure that, yeah, first and foremost, we're keeping people safe during this time too. So more to come. I'm not sure if that was a topic that was discussed at the meeting yesterday, Ian, so perhaps you have something to add.
Through the chair, that was not discussed specifically, but I agree completely with Tracy's assessment. In no way do we want to minimize the option of a site visit. We just have to make sure we have the protocols in place, and we already have some policies that can guide us. So yeah, that's part of the development.
Marie?
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much. That answers my question.
Okay. Sorry for missing you. I see no other hands up. So Michelle, could you call the roll on the motion on the recommendation, please?
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Alan Dale,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Sandy Levin.
Yes. Business for information 7.1, section 28 status report. Can I get a mover that we receive the report as presented? Nancy, would you move it?
I move the report.
Hugh, would you second it?
I seconded.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board on the report? Seeing none. Michelle, could you call the roll, please?
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Alan Dale,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim
Yes.
Reffel, Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg, Sandy
Yes.
Levin.
Item 7.2, blue-green algae at Wildwood. Jen has a report. Can I ask Paul to move and Anna Marie to second that we receive the report as.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Jen, or Jen, is there anything new since the report was written that we should be aware of?
From the operations perspective, I don't believe so. The beaches are now closed for the season. We stopped doing sampling just after Labor Day. So I don't know if Chris has anything to add.
No, I think there's plenty there, and this is kind of reoccurring, and that's why the recycling of past reports, because there is a lot of information out there. So both Karen and Michelle are on the call, and either now or another time, if you had any follow-up questions or anything about this, as you see, it's not a new occurrence, and it kind of speaks to the programming we try and kind of tackle.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Tony, then Brian.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Was there any report on the impact of fisheries this year?
Jen or Chris?
Nothing that I'm aware of, and like I say, Michelle's online. She's our aquatic biologist. If there's anything I'm missing in that, but no, not that I'm aware of, or anything specifically like what happened at Wildwood in the past with the fish kill, anything like that.
Thank you.
Jim, Michelle, is there anything you needed to add or wanted to add?
Through you, no, I haven't had any reports from the big reservoirs this year. We did get some reports, or a report from the coves of some fish kill this year, which is also very typical. That time of the late summer, we often get residents calling in that there's been some fish kill. Wasn't big numbers, so yeah, that's about it for this year.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
I'm good. That was my question as well.
Okay. Any other questions on the report? So the motion has been to receive the report as presented. Michelle, please call the roll.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Alan Dale,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins.
Yes.
Tony Jackson.
Yes.
Nancy Manning.
Yes.
Hugh McDermott.
Yes.
Paul Mitchell.
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray.
Yes.
Brian Petrie.
Yeah.
Jim Reffel.
Yes.
Joe Salter.
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg.
Yes.
And Sandy Levin.
Yes. 7.3 is a report on the West London Dyke reconstruction phase 7. Can I get a motion that we receive the report as presented? Brian, would you move it?
I will move that.
And Jim, second.
I will second that.
Thank you. The report is on the floor. Are there any questions? Brian, is that a new hand?
Just an old hand.
Okay. Paul? Paul, need to unmute, please.
Oh, sorry. Press the button wrong
You're
time.
still mute. There we go.
Okay, we'll try again.
Paul,
Is
you had
it
a question? Yep, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, is it unusual to have only one company bid on this type of work? Is it this type of, there's so few companies that do this?
Mr. Chair, would you like me to respond to that?
Chris, or?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the Roebuck has a long history of bidding this job, and I think all of the local contractors are well aware of that. They've got the experience doing the work. They know exactly what the costs are. While there's been interest enough to pick up tender packages, this year we didn't receive any additional
bids. Roebuck has always given us good results. We feel it's a cost-effective solution as well. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Paul. Anna, then Brian.
Yeah, thank you. And I understand by reading the report that Stantec was previously selected. Just any concerns that they didn't bring forward their bid, or just trying to understand the process a little bit more?
So sorry, Stantec is the consultant for the project, and that work was awarded previously. They weren't bidding on the construction project. Roebuck was the only firm that bid on the construction project.
Okay, and I guess just following up on the previous question, that it's not that unusual just to have one bid then?
Not for this particular project. Again, I think a large part of it is the past experience with the contractor that's very experienced with it, and I think that, well, even last year when McLean Taylor was doing work in the adjacent area, it was decided that they weren't going. They decided not to bid on the project. It's not unusual for us for this one, and there's not really much we can do to encourage additional people. We try and get the word out that the project is posted. They're able to pick up tenders, but if they don't choose to bid the job, there's not much we can do about that.
Thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, through the chair. I guess my question is this: if the successful bid is just over $6 million, what was budgeted for this project? Are they actually under budget, or significantly over budget, or close to the correct number, projected number? Just curious with that, because that doesn't seem to be noted in the report.
Chris?
Fraser, are you able to provide a response to that?
Sure, yeah. So with the WECI money we received and the DMAP money as well, it would be within budget. From the consultant estimate on what they thought it would cost, it's 3.5% higher, so within the range of what we would expect.
Mark?
Yeah, thank you. No follow-up.
Okay. I see no further questions. So Michelle, could you call the roll on receiving the report, please?
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Alan Dale,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
and Sandy Levin.
Yes. 7.4, the Wildwood Dam Motor Control Cabinet. I'd like to have a motion that we receive the report as presented. Joe, would you move that? I think you're muted. Yeah, Joe, could you unmute and move?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you. And Mark, would you second?
Yes, I will second.
Thank you. The report is on the floor. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Okay, Michelle, please call the roll.
Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Alan Dale,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
Sandy Levin.
Yes. Item 8 is the for your information report for September 2020. And moving on to number 9, Ian has a number of remarks. Ian?
Thanks, Sandy. Just letting the board know that while some of our workplaces have continued, our conservation areas being the example, throughout the last 6 months, the Watershed Conservation Center has been closed. As of a week ago, we started to formally have staff return to the WCC, but it's very limited. At a maximum of 25% of staff will be back in the facilities, mainly those who have their job function is more efficient if they're working from that workspace. The majority of staff will continue to work from home. In all likelihood, this is the way it will stay until well into the new year. There's no public access to the WCC yet. And for those staff who are there, there's all kinds of rules and signs and protocols that they have to follow as well. So it's a very cautious return to work. When it comes to board meetings, my assumption is we will probably continue using this format well into the new year. And at this point, we're thinking about the annual general meeting, but frankly, I don't see how it could possibly be like we've done in the past. So we will let you know, but it's likely it will be in a format similar to this. When it comes to board meetings, I would just like to, first of all, I'll ask, not now, but if those of you, you've been participating in all kinds of meetings, Zoom meetings with other organizations, with councils, if you had advice or experience, what works well or what works better in those meetings that you want to share with us, I mean, we're happy to adapt. One of the things Alan and I experienced yesterday, maybe Alan already knows about it, even when it comes to voting, I think Zoom has a feature, a role or a polling feature that could make how you vote, instead of Michelle having to call your name, it's just a pop-up dialog box to say yes or no, could move things along a bit more efficiently. So we're going to try and adapt and improve things as well. So just that call out to you. And the last thing is letting you know that back to the pandemic, we do have what we call our COVID team. This group's been together since the beginning of all of this. They continue to meet weekly, try and adapt to changing public health advice, changing practices, just seeing needs. So even when it comes to the budget, I think there has to be a recognition that the response to the pandemic has taken quite a bit of staff time. Obviously, that's kind of an unfunded activity. Every organization's dealing with that. It's not unusual, but just letting you know, we continue to make this a priority and to reach out to staff to make sure they have the tools they need while they're working from home. And frankly, it seems to be going reasonably well. I think people have adapted as best they can. Still some challenges, but I think we're continuing to deliver. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I don't have any comments to add. Want to get a motion to move into the in-camera session. Wondering if Marie would move, if Hugh would move it and Marie would second it.
I move that we move into closed session.
Marie,
And I
would you
will
second that?
I certainly will.
Thank you.
Okay. Marie Blosh,
Yes.
Alan Dale,
Yes.
Anna Hopkins,
Yes.
Tony Jackson,
Yes.
Nancy Manning,
Yes.
Hugh McDermott,
Yes.
Paul Mitchell,
Yes.
Anna Marie Murray,
Yes.
Brian Petrie,
Yes.
Jim Reffel,
Yes.
Joe Salter,
Yes.
Mark Schadenberg,
Yes.
and Sandy Levin.
Yes. So we're now back in session and we report progress on matter and believe we asked for adjournment. Nancy, would you move adjournment?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good discussion all throughout. Stay safe and hope to see you at October's meeting.
Ian,